The night had barely begun, yet Clara Morgan already felt the familiar sting of being out of place. The chandeliers above her glowed like molten gold, reflecting off crystal glasses and polished silver. But all she could feel were eyes watching her, judging her, slicing into her like cold blades. She sat alone at a table much too elegant for someone like her, adjusting the sleeves of her worn white blouse, praying no one would notice the faint stain near the cuff that refused to wash out. She hadn't wanted to come to this blind date. She knew how these fancy places made people like her feel. But her roommate had insisted, saying it was time she let herself dream again. Clara wasn't sure she deserved dreams anymore. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in stories where grace wins in the end, please like, comment, share, and subscribe right now. It truly helps more people find these heart-touching stories. Clara exhaled slowly, trying to calm her racing heart. The restaurant was filled with polished laughter, clinking glasses, and the soft hum of violins playing something elegant she couldn't name. She felt small in a world built for people with expensive perfumes and even more expensive problems. She worked as a nanny, an honest job, a job she loved, but still one that many people looked down on. And tonight, she could already sense the disapproval in the glances passing over her outfit, her simple hairstyle, her trembling hands. She tried to focus on breathing, telling herself she had nothing to lose. If the date went terribly, she could walk away. She had done harder things, but nothing could have prepared her for what happened next. Her date arrived late, so late that Clara assumed he wasn't coming at all. Nearly 40 minutes had passed before a sharply dressed group of women sitting at the nearby table began whispering loudly enough for her to hear. They acted as though she were invisible, talking about how people like her didn't belong in restaurants like this. Clara sank deeper into her chair, wishing she could disappear, and then he walked in. Tall, broad-shouldered, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, with dark hair slicked back in a polished yet effortless way. His presence shifted the room. Conversations paused, heads turned, even the waitstaff straightened as if on instinct. Clara didn't know who he was, but she knew he wasn't going to be her date. He looked like he belonged in a different universe entirely, except the universe he belonged to suddenly collided with hers. Behind him, toddling on unsteady legs yet full of determination, came a tiny girl in a bright pink dress. Her wide hazel eyes scanned the room with innocent curiosity. When they landed on Clara, something in the little girl's face changed, softened, brightened, awakened. And then the child ran. Clara froze, startled, as the little girl approached her table and reached up with tiny hands, tugging on the edge of Clara's chair, with the kind of confidence only the very young possess. The little girl's eyes shimmered with recognition, despite Clara being certain they had never met before. Before Clara could react, the toddler climbed onto the empty chair beside her, scooted closer, and whispered a single word that sent a ripple of shock through the entire restaurant. "Mom?" The room fell silent. The women who had mocked Clara's clothes stared wide-eyed. Forks hovered mid-air. Even the violins seemed to hush, their melody dimming into the background. Clara's throat tightened. She didn't know what to say, what to do. The little girl gently touched her sleeve, as though making sure she was real. Her big, trusting eyes glowed with something Clara recognized all too painfully: hope. The man, likely the child's father, hurried over, his expression somewhere between confusion and apology. Clara braced herself for reprimands, accusations, something that would eventually shatter this surreal moment. But instead, he looked at the little girl with softened frustration, then at Clara with something that looked startlingly like embarrassment. He didn't blame her. He didn't scold. He only sighed and said her name, Ava. Hearing the child's name made something warm bloom in Clara's chest. Ava. It suited her perfectly: gentle, small, bright. Clara expected the father to lift his daughter away immediately, but Ava stubbornly refused, gripping Clara's hand and refusing to let go. The man hesitated, his gentle attempt at coaxing the girl back failing as Ava leaned into Clara's side. And that was when the whispering began again. The women at the nearby table leaned in, smirking. One of them said loudly that Clara must have arranged this to trap a rich man. Another suggested she was pretending so the CEO, yes, CEO, Clara realized, would pity her. Their voices sliced through the moment like broken glass. Clara's cheeks burned, and tears stung her eyes even as she stayed perfectly still, not wanting to upset the child. The man noticed. His jaw tightened ever so slightly. He turned toward the women with a look that could freeze fire. Their giggles faded instantly. Clara didn't care that he was powerful. She didn't care that his suit looked like it cost more than her rent. All she cared about was the little girl now resting her head on Clara's arm, clinging to her like she was the only safe thing in the room. She swallowed hard and gently whispered, "Sweetheart, I'm not your mom." Ava looked up at her with eyes full of innocence and something heartbreakingly familiar loss. Clara knew that look. She had seen it in the mirror far too many times during her own childhood in the foster system. She knew what it meant to search for someone who wasn't coming back. The man finally spoke softly, explaining that Ava's mother had passed away 2 years ago. Ava had been very young, too young to understand, and for months she had looked for her mother's face everywhere. He said Ava rarely bonded with anyone new. She barely spoke to strangers. She kept to herself at daycare. But for some reason, she had run to Clara like she had known her forever. Clara felt something tighten in her chest, as if some invisible thread had been pulled taut between her and the little girl still clutching her hand. She learned his name was Nathan Hart. Yes, the Nathan Hart. CEO of Hart Tech Corporation, a name Clara had only ever heard in commercials and news reports. But as he knelt next to Ava, trying to gently ease her away from Clara's arm, he didn't look like a powerful CEO. He looked like a father who had no idea how to heal the tiny broken heart in his arms. Ava refused to let go. Nathan looked at Clara helplessly, almost embarrassed by his own child's determination. Clara was torn. She wanted to comfort the child, but she didn't want to overstep. But when Ava trembled slightly, Clara instinctively wrapped an arm around her, and the child sighed with relief, snuggling closer. In that moment, Nathan's stern expression softened into something Clara couldn't quite read: gratitude, surprise, maybe even awe. The date Clara had originally come for never showed. She wasn't surprised. Men rarely stayed after learning she worked long hours as a nanny and had little to offer except love and loyalty, qualities that never seemed to matter to them. But Nathan stayed. He asked if he could sit with her so Ava wouldn't be upset. Clara hesitated, knowing people were already watching. But Nathan's voice was gentle, respectful, asking, not assuming if it would be all right. And so he sat. What followed was the most unexpectedly beautiful meal Clara had ever experienced. Not because of the expensive food or the fancy setting, but because Nathan wasn't what she had imagined. He wasn't arrogant or dismissive. He listened. He asked about her life, her dreams, the children she had cared for. He didn't flinch when she admitted she had grown up in foster care. He didn't look away when she explained why she became a nanny, because she wanted to give children the love she never had. Ava remained beside Clara the entire time, occasionally feeding her pieces of bread with tiny chubby hands. Clara laughed softly, brushing crumbs off her blouse, and every time she did, Nathan watched her with a kind of reverence, as if he were seeing something rare, a woman who loved without pretending, a heart that didn't need polishing to shine. Hours passed like minutes. For the first time in years, Clara forgot to feel out of place. By the time dinner ended, the women who had mocked her looked uneasy, realizing that the man they had been openly admiring throughout the evening had chosen to sit with the poor nanny they had insulted. But Clara didn't care. All she cared about was Ava's tiny hand still wrapped around her fingers and the quiet warmth in Nathan's gaze. Outside the restaurant, the cool evening air brushed against Clara's face as she prepared to say goodbye. But Ava clung to her again, refusing to let go. Nathan knelt in front of his daughter, trying to explain gently that Clara needed to go home. Ava shook her head, tears filling her eyes. Clara knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from the little girl's cheek. She told Ava she would see her again, though she knew it was a promise she had no right to make. But Nathan surprised her. He cleared his throat, hesitated, then asked if Clara would consider spending time with Ava just as a caretaker. Nothing more than what she was comfortable with. He didn't push. He didn't assume she'd say yes just because he had money. He simply asked. Something in Clara's heart whispered that this moment was God's gentle way of handing her a second chance at something she had stopped believing in: love, belonging, family. Weeks passed, then months. Clara spent more and more time with Ava, watching her open up, laugh again, trust again. Clara found herself smiling more too, the past loosening its grip on her heart. Nathan was always respectful, always patient, always grateful. Slowly, life began to feel new, and somewhere in the quiet, moments like when Ava fell asleep in Clara's arms, or when Nathan lingered in the doorway, smiling softly, Clara realized she no longer felt out of place. She felt home. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who believes in compassion and unexpected blessings. Before we end, tell us in the comments, do you believe God sends people into our lives at exactly the right moment?